Today I'm going to talk to you about something rather practical. So I'm not going to talk to you that much about IHE profiles and other stuff, but what we are about to do in the Netherlands is we're going to create a workflow and everything that has to do with the oncological care pathway. That's a very broad perspective, but I will take you through the initiatives that we have started in the Netherlands. Of course, we use a lot of definitions and a lot of profiles, a lot of standards, but the basic idea is that we are looking at the way that you can implement all these different standards in a practical solution. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Vincent Van Pelt. I'm from the Netherlands. I work currently at NICTIS, which is the National Health Institute in the Netherlands. And for the IHE, I'm chairman of the Patient Care Coordination Work Group and also a member of the steering committee. What I'm going to talk to you about today is two things. First, I want to give a small introduction of what NICTIS is, the firm that I'm working for now, and then I'm going to take you through the oncological pathway, and we highlight two parts of this pathway, which is the colon cancer screening. That's a new screening, a national screening in Holland. And I'm going to talk to you about the part where many different physicians get together and talk about what to do with the patient. That's a tumor board review. Okay, first a little bit about NICTIS. It's a National Healthcare ICT Institute. It falls directly under the Ministry of Health. That's also our main funder. But we have also other sponsors for a lot of different tasks. We try to get together all the standardization initiatives that are coming out of the vendors and the hospitals, and everybody who wants to know more about it or wants to get information. That's what NICTIS is for. We are a partner in many ongoing projects, and we have performed standards with this content and workflow definitions in many different fields. For instance, we have created e-lab, e-referral, e-pathology, e-diabetes, and we are currently working on a core data set, which is very important, I think. Also, we're involved in a lot of European projects, and we also do the Dutch translation of Arsenàl.IT, where it is necessary. Okay, let's first look at an oncological pathway. Why an oncological pathway? Because it's very multidisciplinary, it's very often cross-enterprise, and that's of course ideal for standardization, because if you are working with different institutions, you need to have the same language to talk to each other. First of all, an oncological pathway has many different players that play an important part in the whole process for the patient. You can have a gastroenterologist. I don't know if everybody knows what it is, but it's an internal medicine guy who looks at your bowels, and so he specializes in that. So he makes endoscopies, and he takes a little bits of tissue from your gut and then sends it to the pathologist, who looks at it and sees if this is tumor or if it's cancer or something else. Often there are also made photographs, CT scans, etc. So the radiologist is also involved. When you come to the therapy, you are being treated with surgery, so they remove a part of your bowel, or they combine that with radiation. For that you have the radiotherapist, and the oncologist is somebody that gives chemotherapy. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. In order to be able to make sense for the patient, there is often also a care manager. So that's a person who controls the process and informs the patient about what is going to happen with the patient next. Because it's very confusing for the patient, it's very frightening if you have a tumor. So a care manager is somebody who walks with the patient through the whole pathway. Well, as I said, so it's multidisciplinary. You could organize all this in one hospital, but as often the case, you will need many different facilities. Examples are that you have a consultant from an academic hospital who is super specialized in this type of tumor who can give you information. You have a specific radiotherapeutical institutes, you have laboratories, you have all these facilities have to be able to communicate with each other. So it's multidisciplinary and cross-enterprise and often also cross-community. Well, if you want to make this work, you have to have the cooperation of a lot of different organizations. And for the Oncological Pathway, we have managed to organize meetings where we keep each other informed about what we are doing, and we are trying to align the things that we are doing so that it becomes more than just the little initiatives, but that it becomes a real workflow and that everything is joined together in a nice way. NICTIS is sort of the organizer of all the processes. IKNL is the Dutch Cancer Institute, so it is doing research and it provides new goals and new protocols for cancer care. Well, I will spare you the others, but there's a lot of involved parties that you have to talk to and that you have to make appointments with. But we've done it. Okay, what is the IHE involvement of this? Well, IHE participates in defining parts of the oncological pathway and tries to model it so that everybody knows what we're talking about and we can communicate with each other, because IHE is about communicating and facilitating the transfer of information from one place to another. If you look at the whole oncological pathway, you look at three things. You look at the infrastructure, so how can I get things from here to there, or how can somebody else look at my information? Second is the workflow. Where are you in the process? Who has done what? And you should be able to track what is going on in the process of the patient. And then, of course, there's the content. So you have to know, what do I convey? How do I write down that this person is allergic to certain type of medicine? What is his medical history? And things like that. So you need to define the content. And you can, of course, start this oncological pathway very large, and then you will be busy for 10 years, and then everything has changed in the world, and you can start all over again. So you should stay on a small basis. You have one very specific use case, and that's where you focus on. And then when people see that this is working, then they say, oh, that's what standardization is for. Okay, now I understand it. And that's, if you have a good example which is really working, then people will know what all this effort that all these standardization companies are doing is for. So we have one particular use case, and that is the colon cancer. So a patient with colon cancer has very specific information needs. How do you describe this? The workflow is something I will explain to you. You do it by adding blocks of workflow together, and you don't model the whole workflow in one time. You build it up on different profiles that you connect to each other. Well, I've sort of called it a care pathway in a box. That means that hospitals and vendors get a sort of recipe. This is how you can implement this workflow. And for that you need to have a cookbook which says, okay, you use these standards, so you have to be sure that you connect these facilities, you have to look at safety, and you have to look at access and roles and things like that. Don't just give them one XDS or one CCD, but make it one story where everything falls into place and where you have an actual cookbook on how to do this. So it's an implementation guide that I'm talking about. Well, the infrastructure, that's something which is already there. I mean, you also hear in the Veneto, you have IHE XDS, which is a way of transporting and storing and retrieving your medical documents. So what the IHE is doing in the Netherlands is defining content and workflow of certain parts of the oncological pathway. And with that, we use, of course, many different already existing standards. Okay, content first. So I'm going to talk to you about content and about workflow. How do you define this? You see in the middle, core data set. That's one word, okay? If you describe all the different data elements that you need in a medical record, you can say there is a sort of a core group of information like medication or like medical history or allergies or blood groups or does the patient want to be operated or not, things like that. Those are not specialism-specific informations. That is information that everybody in the medical health care can work with. Yeah. Now, what we've done, we've put together a lot of data element lists from different organizations. This lists of 1,000, 1,500 data items, and we've categorized them. And what we came up with was this 3-layer architecture. First, you have the core, which is the generic information. You could compare that with CCD, for instance. Those 17 sections are a nice starting point for generic medical information. If you focus on the colon cancer data set, you also have an oncology data set, which is generic for oncology. Just like you can have a generic data set for cardiology, for surgery, for urology. So it's information that is specific to one of the specialisms. And then the third layer is that you can make specific data sets about the colon cancer, because the information that you store with colon cancer is different from breast cancer, for instance. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Yeah, you have a multi-layer. And once you have defined the core data set, you don't have to worry about that anymore, and you can go on by extending on the core data set. Now, that is something that everybody always talks about, and that should be done, blah, blah, blah. But in the Netherlands, there is an initiative which has started 1 year ago. It's called GOG, Generieke Overdrachtsgegevens, which is roughly translated to Generic Referral Dataset. The scope is referral, so it does not mean that this is the dataset for hospitals, but this is what you need if you want to get information from one place to another. Yeah? There are 8 academic hospitals in the Netherlands, and they all have decided that they want to use this core dataset in all their communications. And they don't say, maybe we're going to use it. No, they are going to use this. So they are also in the process of defining these core dataset. What exactly goes into this core dataset? Exactly, not roughly, not with a section, but with as many codes as possible, but still manageable for everyone. So it's a core standard data set for referral. All academic hospitals are working together with NICTIS to make this a success. And it's a complete CCD definition, including many coded sections, so as many as possible. Especially in the medication, it's a real hard work. All these coded elements have also been SNOMEDified, so all the codes are linked to SNOMED-CT, so you can also send this to somebody in Spain, and then it's in Spanish. Already about 30 man-years have been invested in just defining this core data set. So there's a lot of work because each of these academic hospitals have devoted 2 to 4 men just to work on this. So it's a lot of work. But then you have something, because from there you can go and extend. So that was the part in the middle. And now we're going to talk about the oncological and the disease-specific data set. Often it works when you have a project which is like very small, and then you attach a lot of work on the content definition. You just add it to this small project, because once this small project works, then other people will say, or other hospitals will say, hey, that's a nice data set, can I use it? And then, of course, you get more acceptance of this data set. That's the way that you can often get more results from than if you have a national committee and a lot of different parties who all want to have their own say about what should be in there. As a chairman of the patient care coordination work group, I've installed an expert group for the different specialties. So there's one which is the oncology expert work group. There are surgeons in there, radiologists, all the people who really know what they're talking about. And they are going to say to me, as a technical guy, sort of a technical guy, this is the workflow that we want to have implemented, and these are the elements of information that we want to share with each other. So they are the specialists. They say to me what they want to have transferred. And with that, we go to our other working group, and then we see how we can get this in a technical framework. So then you have two parts. We are now starting with colon cancer, but we already have looked, because they already were there, we have looked at mama cancer, lung cancer, and prostate cancer workflows, and we've looked at the data that is necessary for all these workflows. And that gave us the opportunity to select what is generic for oncology. So the layer where you have a generic oncological data set has already been checked by 4 different types of tumor. One example, you have TNM, that's tumor, node, and metastasis, which is something that you can use with almost every cancer. So that is put in the second layer, which is the generic oncological data set. Is that clear? And then tumor-specific, for instance, for colon cancer, you need the distance between the rectum and where you find this tumor. For mama, you need other things that you want to pin down. So then we have a disease-specific layer. Okay, so that was the content. And we're working on this, and this is an ongoing project, but it is going really fast. Because the core data set is ready now, people are getting enthusiastic and say, okay, so I can use this as my sort of standard, because it is expected that also the regular hospitals will use this academic hospital data set, because they think, well, at least now we can talk to each other. So the content is going really fast. Workflow is a new thing. I mean, I was here indeed a year ago, and that was also the birth of XDW. And that is a new profile which gives us the opportunity to have in place a very lightweight way of following or managing the workflow of any kind of process. And as Lisa Nelson also already mentioned, she's explained a little bit about how this works, but here is a specific case of how to translate a care pathway into the IHC building blocks that she was talking about. Don't know, can you please help me? I need to bring up another document, which is behind this one, so you need to close this one, I think, or make it smaller. Or maybe can you click on it? Oh no. Huh? Can you click on this one? Click? No. Oh, it doesn't. No. No. Okay. That's the one. Yeah. Okay. Can you make it a little bit smaller? A little bit small, because you can't see everything. Okay. I'm sorry this is in Dutch, but I did not have the time to translate it, but it just is something to explain to you how complicated all the different steps can be and how simple the eventual schema can be. Okay. This is a workflow definition of an oncological colon cancer case, where you start with a, is there an arrow that I can? No, okay. Well, top left you see huisarts, which is the GP. He sends his patient, he refers his patient to the gastroenterology bit. Yeah, okay, thank you. Who does the primary diagnostics. He decides whether it's okay or not okay. A scopy is being done within 5 workdays, so there's a special quick diagnostic protocol that whenever a patient is suspected of a tumor, then he will be certain that within 5 days he knows the diagnosis. And we've accommodated the workflow so that this is a small period. Well, I won't go through all these different steps, but basically you get a lot of diagnostic studies. Then there's a diagnosis, colon rectum carcinoma, and then you have this preoperative oncology meeting, this one, and that's the tumor board review. So that's where you come together and you say, okay, this patient with this age, with this problem, what shall we do? Shall we radiate, or shall we do surgery or chemotherapy, or a combination of those? After that you get the therapy, and you get either the, see if I can take this down, yeah. So you have radiotherapy, chemotherapy, another discussion, and you see all the arrows, it's very complicated, but this is the whole oncological pathway. And I would have to go back to the presentation. Okay, yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, if you have looked at this schema, it's often very difficult with decision points and should I go here or should I go there? You have a very complicated modeling of the workflow process. But in practice, it's not that fixed, especially with patients with tumors. Things can go very quickly wrong, or you have to do something else. And that's why we've invented the idea of making building blocks that you can add to each other, and then you have the workflow of this particular patient. This is an example of a suggestion that I've made about a cross-enterprise, that's the X always, oncological pathway workflow definition. It's nothing else than just simple steps. You have a bit where you have screening, maybe, like for the colon cancer, there's a screening part. Then you have a referral. You have the stage where you have diagnosis. You have TBR, which is tumor board review, pre-operation, your treatment plan, your therapies, and there's another evaluation moment with the TBR after the therapy, and then you have the follow-up, and otherwise you can also have palliative care if the patient is not curable. Now, these are sort of the most simple steps on a high level, the highest level, how you can describe an oncological pathway. And as Lisa Nelson also said, you can link these different workflow definitions by saying, okay, the screening, I have a separate workflow definition for that. And for the referral, I have a 3-step workflow definition that I can attach to that, I can use to. And for the tumor board review, I have a couple of steps defined, and I can use that to describe that's TBR step. So they're sort of linking and nesting all these different workflows. That's for basic. That's for a study request and for therapy. And of course, you can see for therapy you have surgery, and you can imagine that there is still another linking or nesting with how this surgery is going on in the workflow. And so you have a possibility to see what is going on on the highest level, and you can see, if you like, you can drill down to the other workflow steps to see what is done there and which documents are used there, and which information is available. I'll come back to the steps a bit later. But there were two things in the previous slide that I'm going to talk about now. That's the screening part and the tumor board part. And first we start with the screening part. It's called Colonis. It's a national program, and it has been defined by defining a lot of data sets together with many stakeholders. We use a lot of different standards in the process. We don't mind if it's, we don't care if it's just one or two or three different standards. We use which is practical. We've cooperated with a lot of vendors who are building parts of this Colonis workflow into their own software. So at the moment we have 5 different vendors. They've just included parts of the software in their own systems. That's how it works together. Project has started in 2011. We have a pilot we had a pilot in April. That went well, and we're going live in October. So that's only a 2-year run-through for the whole. This is what it is, and all these different stations, they all work together and they all transfer information from one to the other. To walk you through it, if you go from here, this is where it starts. This is a screening organization that sends letters to all people above 50 years. It's an envelope with a letter, of course, and a little bottle, and we'll come to that later. So there's an organization, it's a logistical organization and a medical organization, and it's also doing quality assurance. If you go to the second step here, this is the letter part. Then you have the third part where the patient is required. He dips a little stick into his poo, and then he puts the bottle together with the envelope and sends it to the organization. And then in the lab, here, in the lab they just see whether there's blood in the stool. It's a very simple test. And the result, if it's not good, then the result is going to the huisarts, which is the GP. And then he makes an appointment. He can make an appointment. He can change and reschedule his own appointment. So that's something where you have sort of a patient portal functionality. Then he's being taken to the gastroenterologist, where they're taking a coloscopy, an endoscopy, where they take out a little bit of tissue. They send the tissue to the pathologist, and then they can go on with the rest of the care pathway. So it's only the screening part takes many different steps, and in this case, all the steps are done by Colonis, which is software which organizes everything. So in this case, you don't need a cross-enterprise pathway because it's all in one place, so you can just let them do their work. This is part of the workflow, but I'll skip that. It is, yeah, you can see here they use HL7 messages, they use HL7 v3 and v2, and they use parts where they use XDS registries through each other. It's not, it depends on what the next party is able to accept. Is he consuming v2 or v3? Here you are. Yeah, so that was the Colonis part. So it's at the front, that's the screening part. And now I finish with the tumor board review, which, as I said, is cross-enterprise. The target for it is to improve interoperability and to improve quality, because often the process is going wrong. I don't know if you have tumor board reviews here in Italy. Do you have tumor board reviews where you... Little bit. Okay, yeah. In Holland, it's being used widely. For specific types of tumor, you are obliged to go through this tumor board review, which is often 2 or 3 hospitals together who are deciding on what to do with the patient. Very handy. But it's not paid, that's a problem. Okay, I come back to a little bit to the steps that I was already showing you earlier and how it works. These are the steps for the tumor board review. You request the tumor board review for a patient. Sorry, it has to be scheduled. So, or can this patient be scheduled for next week? Does he meet the inclusion or exclusion criteria? Then you have time that you can wait. But in the time that you wait, you can prepare, because all the information that is made, that is created during this process, is available to everybody. So on the top left, you see clinical documents. Those are the documents that the requester is using for his request. I still have -1 minute, but I'm always there. So these clinical documents are like a CT scan and a pathology report. And the guys in the prepare stage, they can look at the clinical documents, they can look at the DICOM images, they can look at the text from the pathology, so they can already form their opinion. Then you have the tumor board meeting itself, and then a document is written, a report is written, that is then sent to all the participants. That was it. So to recap, I've highlighted 2 parts of this pathway and shown, I hope, that there's a lot of work in there, but it really pays to do this. And we are filling in all the other different stations, but you should work station for station and not do the whole thing in one time. That's impossible. Okay, thanks so much.